spoke with Rachel Cholst, who's a music journalist from New York City who has been writing for the queer country music community for the last 9 years. You may have already seen her work in magazines like No Depression, The Boot, and Wide Open Country. Currently, she's the editor of Rainbow Rodeo Magazine, and as far as she knows, Rainbow Rodeo is the first print publication devoted to queer country music. Queer country indie artists, Beyoncé, building the queer country music canon, documenting history in real time, running a magazine, responsibility to ourselves and to our communities, the gay ol' Opry, how rich people should be, DIY. These are some of the things we get into. Hope you enjoy. Hello, Rachel Cholst. How are you doing today?
I'm good. You got the pronunciation on the first try. Nice work.
Oh, yes, sweet. And I think that's a really great last name too. Like I don't know, it just sounds really cool.
Thank you. Yeah. It's Russian, possibly some corruption of a Russian word. And so most people say Cholst. It really doesn't matter because uh, it's somewhere in between those two. And my grandfather changed the pronunciation to Kolst, so it would sound more German. We won't
Oh,
get into that, but you know,
okay.
so I'm agnostic, but it's interesting to watch people try.
Do you speak any Slavic languages?
Nope.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, no,
so
I'm a sixth generation New Yorker and I write about country music, so
yeah, that's interesting. Like, how did you get into country music being a New Yorker?
yeah, I think that's always an interesting question. I think my like origin story is that I've always really been into music and for some reason my parents bought me like a Walkman as like a Hanukkah gift in like first grade or something. So I was like 5 or 6 and I was
Hmm.
like, okay, so I want to listen to what the cool kids listen to. So obviously I listened to the contemporary rock station and I
Hmm.
would just fall asleep listening to that and like with my headphones on.
Hmm.
Um, and then the station switched formats, which I guess maybe dates back to like Clear Channel taking everything over, and switched to country, classic rock, not country, classic rock. And I was like, I don't know if I like this. It seems kind of cheesy. Bear in mind, my parents did not listen to any of this stuff. Like they're into Kenny G, the Beatles, and my mom loves classical music. So I wasn't like listening to classic rock at home or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then Jack and Diane by John Mellencamp comes on. And like that's it. That's like the sound I've been chasing ever since. So that's
Really?
kind of where it came from. I've written professionally about country music for almost 10 years now, but really a lot of my knowledge is about like the new music that has been coming out for the last 10 years or so. I'm definitely still brushing up on my like country music history.
What were you writing about before you were writing about country music?
There's like it's now called Americana, but there's like a pocket of like indie artists who maybe like came up in the South and the Midwest doing punk, and then as they mellowed out, they like came back to kind of like a more country sound. So again, I think it kind of goes back to whatever it was that drew me into John Mellencamp, that kind of like edge to it, but also like the twang and the warmth and
Mm,
using G chords.
lots of G chords.
Yeah.
I love that. So tell me about Rainbow Rodeo Zine magazine. Is it magazine or zine or both or all of the above?
I don't know. All of the above. I guess a zine since it's self-published. I actually am holding in my hand like the proof copy of the current issue. So
Oh, sweet.
once by the end of the day, it will be ready for pre-order and you'll be able to buy it digitally because I'm just going through like the text and editing the page numbers and making sure it looks good. Um, so I aim for twice a year to have a physical publication, Rainbow Rodeo, which focuses on queer country artists. But during the rest of the year, there's a website, Rainbow Rodeo, where we try to update daily with album reviews, like a little compilation of the week's new singles, interviews, premieres, all the kinds of things you'd expect from a music site. And then those essays and columns and stuff get compiled into the zine. Not all of them, of course, but yeah.
Cool. So you do print twice a year, but
Mhm.
then year round you're doing articles
That's right. And podcasts too.
and
I
podcasting.
have a lot of free time from my day job, but that's changing. So I need to figure out what to prioritize.
What's your day job, if I might ask?
I work as like an academic advisor at a college in New York, which is why I recognized your Zoom login. And
Ah,
um, yes, I'm working remotely today, but I'm also beginning the process of becoming licensed as a therapist. So I'm basically working like three jobs right now, and that's not totally sustainable. So
that sounds
I'm,
stressful.
yeah, yeah. So I'm with, that's why I was like so confused when trying to schedule this. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I'm doing less freelance writing for other publications so I can focus, at least keep Rainbow Rodeo going.
Yeah, I noticed that, like, because at the beginning of this year, I decided, man, I love music so much, and I've written for, post trashed a little bit, like a tiny bit before this year, but then I was like, I want to write more about music this year, and then now I'm writing a lot more, and now I'm getting emails from,
Mhm.
PR people, and now I'm like, wait, the labor thing is kind of getting strenuous because there's not a lot of money or pay out there for writing about music. Um, and I noticed that like you try to pay people or you do pay people for sure the print, and I'm not sure about the
Mhm.
but that was one
Yeah,
of
so
the
the way I do it is Rainbow Rodeo, the site has a subscription, and one of the subscription tiers includes access to the zine. So for just $1 a month, you can get e-copies of the zine. If you pay a little more than that, that will get you like a print copy that, we'll just send to you. Um, I found the easiest solution for that is just I listed an artist named Adeem the Artist, who a lot of queer country fans will know, carries the zine in their online shop, and their team fulfills it the way that they like ship out Adeem's like t-shirts and LPs and stuff. So I think the easiest way to do it for me is I just make a code that makes the zine free and send that to subscribers, and then it's up to them to like actually go and fill in their address and stuff because I don't want to have to keep making sure their addresses are up to date. So, you know, um, so it's not like it's automatically going to come, but I just feel like that's sort of the easiest way to do it. Um, yeah, so I have a subscription model, and at this point, pretty much all of it goes to paying writers. So I try to have someone, either an artist or a writer, write some kind of essay once a month, or a feature, as we call it in the biz. So that would be like if you've ever read an article with like a profile of the musician or interviewing a couple different musicians about a certain topic, that would be like what's considered a feature. Um, and then I think the thing that's like a pleasant surprise is keeping up with all the reviews because I have been writing my own personal music blog for years, Adobe and Teardrops,
Mhm.
and I thought it would be so cool to just really focus on queer artists, but there's not enough, like out there to sustain like its own site. And
Yeah.
then it turned now, like 10 years later, that's not true. Now I'm having trouble keeping up. I used to have a Rolodex of everybody who
Hmm.
was like queer and making country music, and now like that's just like not the case. I am too old for TikTok, so I think that also means I'm missing out on a lot of people over there. And I refuse to scroll Instagram, so I'm just like letting people come to me basically,
That's
for better or worse.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I see that. So you're saying also like the pool of country queer artists is like very large now.
Yes, it's only growing. It's really exciting. I think we could talk about how the genre is changing and like we're starting to see like tiers of like commercial artists versus indie artists and like the tensions that creates. I'm definitely more on my heart is with the indie artists more. But sorry, I got a little off track there. Yeah,
That's
so
okay.
like, the genre is growing, is what you're saying. And so I think like it's really important to have a site like Rainbow Rodeo or anywhere else that is championing, indie artists and people who are doing DIY like you're doing,
Hmm.
because It's just getting harder and harder to cut through the noise. We also know that the most popular social media networks, TikTok, anything run by Meta, are sort of throttled with by using this algorithm. So I think, like, as most artists know, you're basically like throwing a bunch of TikToks or whatever at the wall and hoping it catches, but that's
Right.
not sustainable or fun. Um, so I think, like, even though it's kind of boring and maybe not the most popular business model right now, like, it's never been profitable, but like a blog or a site or something that's static that is really curated by an actual human being is, I think, still the way forward and still really important.
Yeah, and it seems like so you're not only kind of combating or in opposition conversation of like pop attention from big sites and Meta and all those things, but there's also the tension of like ownership of country music too. I suppose that since like queer country is even becoming more popular and larger, there's other tensions of ownership that might pop up like along the lines. Like, do you think about that at all?
Totally. I mean, I think, like, it's kind of new in that the first person who recorded that we know of who recorded a queer country album, Patrick Haggerty, he performed under the name Lavender Country. He passed away like 2 years ago. Like, he was alive and he had that history and he was able to create that bridge with like the current generation of artists, and we can carry that forward. So something I'm thinking about, because I've been a fan and I guess part of the scene since 2011, is how do we make sure that the history is preserved, but not in a way that's gate kept. There's a lot of stuff I don't know, right? Like, I'm going to be 37 in August. I'm from New
Mhm.
York, went to college, came back in 2011. Before that, I wasn't going to shows because I was too young, right? So there is like a whole decade's worth of like music and art and people who were just like making country music with no expectation of anyone ever knowing about it or caring other than their friends. But
Right.
we do need that because that's still part of the story. So I came into the scene through a monthly concert series called the Gale Opry,
Oh, cool.
run by an artist named Karen Pittleman. The band is Karen and the Sorrows. And I think she did so much to create like this national network of artists, right, using Facebook. So
Hmm.
we could talk about the dangers of social media, but also the way it like literally saves lives, especially for like marginalized people. And we wouldn't have a robust community of queer country artists if it wasn't for Karen and a few other folks on the West Coast, like Cindy Emchi, whose band is Secret Emchi Society, or Cindy Emch, band is Secret Emchi Society. I always
Hmm.
mix that up. And Eli Conley, who is a trans singer who kind of made like the Gale Opry West Coast. But the point is that, like, once people knew they had places to perform and not just with their friends, they started touring. And so even if some of those artists have broke through into like kind of more mainstream indie consciousness or even like actually became famous, like Amethyst Kia, I like worked the door at her first show in New York City.
Oh, cool.
Um, Mount Moriah, or the lead singer H.C. McIntyre is still performing. Um, that's just like to name Allison Russell, just to name some people off the bat. Paisley Fields, Deem the artist. For people who are into like country music, those are names you probably know now as a result. Um, how do we make sure that story is preserved? Because the artists are busy being artists and like they're
Right.
touring, they're making music, they're doing their thing. Um, but it's important to know, right? And so something, also you can tell me if I'm going on too long, but something
No,
I've
you're
been
good.
thinking about, and one of the articles in this issue of the zine is how do we build the canon of queer country music? Like, what are the classics? What are the songs that everyone's going to keep singing over and over again? In the same way that other music seeds, you have artists that everyone refers to, that everyone's listened to.
Hmm. I love that you're like looking at it, building slash contributing to like a canon. That's really cool that you're thinking about it in such an expansive way. Um,
I studied history in college and I was a history teacher. So like my approach to writing, um, or any musician I interview, no matter like who I'm writing for, who's going to read the interview. I just want to focus on like if someone was reading this article in 20 years, like what would be interesting for them to know and what would be important for them to know. I
Yeah.
always think about like an album both as what the artist wants to say, but also how it's responding to the particular time period.
Mm. I like that. How much do you pay attention to like the news in country? I mean, I'm guessing like a good amount since you're writing about it, or do you try to avoid it? I don't know. Are you trying to find
Yeah, I mean,
information?
like I personally have become a bit of a social media hermit in the last couple of years. I think we all know what it's been doing to us.
Yeah.
Um, I had also, I think, like, especially with Trump administration part two, we see the ways that these larger companies are colluding with the administration to, help them do whatever it is they want to do with all our personal information. On the other hand, if the point of Rainbow Rodeo or any of my other work is to make sure people learn about artists who I love, then I also still need to be using this medium because this is how we all learn stuff now. Um, so like my personal compromises, I really don't spend time scrolling. I haven't formally deactivated any of my personal like Instagram or Facebook accounts,
Uh-huh.
but I don't post to them anymore. Um, and so I'm really only using the Rainbow Rodeo Instagram. I still use Blue Sky for like farting around on the internet or whatever, but I'm
Hmm.
just like don't really do it anymore. I used to write for some more mainstream publications before they like got shut down by venture capitalists. So you can still find my work on sites called The Boot and Wide Open Country, and you'll see that I and a bunch of other writers on those sites, for as long as they let us do it, we're like really focused on highlighting artists that the radio was kind of bypassing. So
Mm.
in the 2010s, and this is still very much true, even when you look at like country music playlists on Spotify and Tidal. So like straight white women are really just like shut out of that. The door has been closed pretty hard since 9/11.
Really?
Smarter people than me have talked about it. I'm happy to get into it. Um, and then, if the blonde white woman can't get on the radio, then like, you know, women of color, queer people are definitely not. Um, and so there was like a movement to try to like among some journalists to try to push back on that. Let's give coverage to these artists who are trying really hard, but the radio's ignoring. So for a long time, Wide Open Country and The Boot were doing really cool work with that. So even while at the same time they're posting like these kind of bullshit articles that are designed to be shared on Facebook by your grandma, five like five George Strait songs about fishing or whatever, right? Or like um no, I made some pretty good money just like reading someone else's interview of an artist and then kind of summarizing it. Like
Uh-huh.
sometimes you just gotta do that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but or like wedding photos or whatever. Like there was like that kind of fluff for like the mainstream like country music stars, but also like when we got to write about, or like there was also space for us to write about the things that we were passionate about. So that would be like women artists, people like making like pop country that's political, you know, like the stuff that the industry itself kind of strays away from. Like it's there. And of course, streaming has made it a lot easier for those artists to access audiences, but it's also made it a lot harder to make a living as an artist because music itself is so devalued.
Something I saw this post the other day. I don't know if you heard of it from this one
Mhm.
country artist, Gavin Adcock.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you
I
see?
always saw the headlines, but he basically what he said that Beyonce wasn't country.
So he said, there's only three people in front of me on the Apple Music charts, and one of them is Beyonce. You can tell her we're coming for her fucking ass. That shit ain't country music, and it ain't ever been country music. and and it just made me think of because I also read your essay, queering country music with the Grammys,
Mhm.
um, and it talked about ownership in country music, and also gatekeeping, and also its ties to white supremacy in certain aspects of the genre. What's up with the gatekeeping in country music? And also when I heard that, like as a Black person, I was just like, that sounds a little aggressive. Just as a person, I guess I don't have no you don't have to be black or anything, but like we're
Oh,
coming for
totally.
the fucking ass. Do you know what I mean? Like, why do you have to
Yeah.
come for her? Like, what did she do to you? You're 26,
Also, this
and
album's been out for like a year. Like, get over it.
yeah,
Um, so I guess like two things I want to say first. I don't think Gavin Adcock's been like relevant in a long time.
mm.
Or um, isn't he like I feel like he's some mid 2000s like bro country guy. I
I
don't
don't.
like
He's
all of them sound the same, all of them have the same names. So I don't know. But
mm,
anyway, it really doesn't matter because the other thing is the fixation on Apple Music is really funny to me. Um, so I don't know if you're aware of this, but the way that Apple Music tabulates its charts is different
mm,
from basically everyone else. So it's very easy to game Apple Music for better or worse.
mm-hmm.
Um, so you might remember when what was it? The J6 prisoners, they like recorded like a fucking album of like recording, like singing the national anthem or whatever.
I
And
know.
like it shot to the top of like the iTunes chart when that guy Oliver Anthony went viral for a song North of Richmond, which is like
Wow.
vaguely anti-Semitic and also like makes fun of like people using food stamps to buy like fudge rounds. It's like that's a whole thing. That was like
Mm-hmm.
2 summers ago, I think. It wasn't the song itself wasn't popular. It just shot up the iTunes charts because the iTunes charts, I believe, track sales and downloads.
Ah.
So if you just get a bot farm to buy the song a million times, it's gonna suddenly be an overnight sensation on iTunes,
Oh
and then
wow.
maybe that gets other people to notice. The statistics that really matter are streaming numbers on like Spotify. I think it's not as trans like you don't actually see the number on title, but I know they're keeping track of that.
Mm-hmm.
And Billboard has two charts. So, there's the traditional one you think of like top 40, top 100. My understanding is those mostly track radio play,
Mm.
but they have another chart called Hot 100. And then I think that's also broken down into different genres. And the Hot 100 is a compilation of streams, downloads, and radio play.
Mm.
So that is kind of, in my opinion, the more accurate one in terms of what people are actually listening to.
Uh-huh.
So like Gavin Adcock can be obsessed with like his Apple charts, but like, okay, great. Um, it like it's a fiction, and conservatives love gaming like Apple Music for that reason because it's
Mm.
like much easier for them to like manufacture that hit. On the other hand, there's ways that people on the left have kind of gamed it. There's an artist named Semler who's queer,
Mm-hmm.
and she is really focused on they. Sorry, I've forgotten Semler's pronouns. I'll just not use pronouns.
Okay.
Semler is very focused on making like spiritual kind of like indie folk music. It definitely falls under the category of queer country, in my opinion. And it's also explicitly Christian. And Semler
Oh.
listed it as the album as a Christian album instead of
Oh.
country. And so then a bunch of people are like, holy shit, I love this. I need this. Bought it, listened to it, whatever. So it got into like the top spot, top one on like Apple's Christian charts for that reason. Flamey Grant is a drag queen who also um, performs a lot of explicitly spiritual, not necessarily Christian music, but of course she talks about her experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that also has gotten like done big numbers on like Apple Music's Christian charts. If Lil Nas X listed Old Town Road as country in the like genre when submitting it to Apple Music, and then everyone loves that song, so of course, it goes to the top of the Apple Music charts, and then Nashville's like, well, that's not a real chart, right? So I think like it's a give and take. I think it's just another reminder of like just because it's on the internet, like there's still like you gotta look at what's going on like behind the scenes there, especially with data and the way data is tracked. But that doesn't explain why Gavin Adcock and all these other like white guys are so obsessed with Beyonce. Um, I believe that article about the Grammys was written by Josh Friedberg, who's like
Ah.
a contributor to the site, but I've also written similar articles like a lot over the last 10 years, so I couldn't even point you to one. Um, Again, there are a lot of like much smarter people than me who have written about this. There's entire books about the way that like race has played into the marketing of music. especially rock and roll and country music and the blues. Um, and so I think the obsession with Beyonce and country comes from like a couple of different places. One is the idea that like country music is white, even though um, the art form itself is, from both the forceful and voluntary combination of, white folk music brought from like England and Ireland,
Hmm.
um, music created by enslaved peoples and freed Black people across
Hmm.
Appalachia in the South, as well as like indigenous musical forms, which I think like people are starting to dig into. Like the yodeling that you often hear in country music is possibly from like indigenous singers, not necessarily from Africa, and certainly not from, Western Europe. So, I think like it's all of those things. It is like an American art form.
Hmm.
Um, and I think more people are familiar with like the story of rock and roll and how Black artists were shut out, were forced to like perform behind the scenes, but it's the same story for rock and roll. And the same way that like artists were divided into race records, that was the term for any music produced by Black artists. And, when records literally first started being made. And country music was for the white artists, even though it was like literally the same songs.
Hmm.
And like a lot of people learning from each other too. Um, Again, my country music history is not as encyclopedic as others, but Mother Maybelle Carter is considered one of the first, like the first country music star, and like popularized a certain like guitar strumming technique. But it turns out she learned that from a Black man who was never credited. Um, until music historians have, fortunately unearthed that part of the story. And there's lots of examples of famous like country artists who learned like their techniques alongside or and from Black artists who were not given credit and who died in poverty.
Hmm.
So I think like it's there. I think it's very much a part of this idea of who gets to be American and who doesn't. And maybe that is the attraction of country music to like a Jewish lesbian from New York City is like, how does this like get created? But at the same time, like I do not listen to like any country music that gets put on the radio. Sometimes I'll dip my toe in to see what they're up to, but like it's really not my business. That's how I like to think about it because it's mostly bad. Um, I think though, like the same way that music, like clothing has trends, music has trends. So like a lot of the people who grew up listening to 90s country and listening to songs that were like emotionally authentic and had lots of acoustic guitars, um, those people are now the ones who are in country, who are making country music. So if you liked country music from the 90s, like the Dixie Chicks and Garth Brooks and whoever, you might want to like tune back into country radio because there's a lot of music like that on there now, and it's becoming more popular.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I strayed away from Beyonce. That album, I really enjoyed it. One of my favorite artists, Cam,
Hmm.
contributed a lot of those songs and helped produce the record. But mostly, I'm just excited that Cowboy Carter is out because now Cam can put out her album because she had to wait for Cowboy Carter to come out first. Um, yeah, I think like within the country community,
Hmm.
uh, country music itself has a lot of traditions, like the way you're supposed to do things. I'm a baseball fan and it's the same way, right? Like there's the right way to play the game, and it's
Yeah.
all about these unwritten rules. Um, Countries like that, the genre is still very much based on the radio in a way that most genres aren't anymore.
Mm.
And so um, Beyonce did not submit some of those songs to country radio. And so
Mm.
there is this sort of like, she did she didn't roll out that album the way a country most country artists would like send it out to whoever they're supposed to send it out to. And then of course the album does well and all these other metrics, and then everyone's like pissed, like, how come you didn't do it this way? Um, and so when people were trying to request the song on country music stations, they were like, sorry, we literally don't have it yet. We have to wait to get it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Um, and that of course created like controversy as it should, but also it's like it's a little both. Um, she didn't do it the right way, but also like fuck the right way, because the right way like is keeping like all kinds of people out of the industry.
Right.
And she did that on purpose because she had performed with the Dixie Chicks at I forget which award show, and I think like about 10 years ago, and then somebody was really shitty to her backstage, and that's kind of what made her want to do Cowboy Carter. And so she was like, I'm just gonna do it without Nashville. Um, but at the same time, there are a lot of Black artists who have been, fighting against the headwaters to make their way through Nashville. And I would have liked to see more collaboration with those artists. There's a group in Nashville now called the Black Opry. That's amazing. It's just like a really cool network of artists who are working together to put out records and concerts and do package tours together, and also like advocacy within the industry. Um, and yeah, it would have been really cool to see more collaboration with them from Beyonce's Kim, in my opinion,
Do you think
because
there?
it's not like they're not there.
Do you think there's a noticeable gap between like the pop artists and the indie artists, but you think that like they could be more connected, interconnected, and support?
Yeah, definitely. I think, and that's like what I'm also seeing in the queer country world as well. You've got your Orville Peck, Brandy Carlisle, um, and people are kind of acting like they're the only ones. It's not really their fault. I think like a lot of Brandy Carlisle fans, I've gotten in trouble with them on the internet as well, but it's like they're kind of like Harry Potter, where they don't read other books, they don't listen to other music unless it's somehow connected to her. And it's just like so there are a lot of people who think Orville Peck and Brandy Carlisle are like the first big queer country artists or whatever. But
Mhm.
meanwhile, there have been people like toiling away for decades. And like, how do you bridge the gap? But I think that's probably just true in any art scene. Some people get really famous, some people don't. What is the responsibility of the people who are super successful to everyone else?
Yeah,
And is it fair to ask Beyonce to represent all Black country artists? Is it fair to ask Orville Peck to represent all gay country artists? But I also think if part of your success is related to this aspect of your identity, there is some obligation to plug in. But I'm also not them, so I don't know, you
right,
know?
right. But so you do kind of believe in like a little bit of a community-based system, and there is potential for more growth there.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's like, musicians are broke all the time, and it's really
Mm.
hard to like even make a middle class living doing this, but um it's not a zero-sum game. And so, my approach to Rainbow Rodeo is also like, how do we help everyone who's involved with this benefit? So I would love to run more articles, but I want to pay people fairly to do that. So that just means fewer articles by other people until we get to that point.
Your focus is DIY, but then like I was really attracted to some things you said in the essay. I think that this one was your essay. Why we can't get along.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you talked about Philip Lammon's and Darius Rucker's "Love Is Love" song.
Oh God.
um, Darius Rucker, the lyrics like "Black, white, Yankee rebel, country boy singing, Aaron Neville," and I wanted to read one of the quotes that I like that you said. And I think this first part is like a quote by one of them is it says, "Gay, straight, I don't care, because love is love." That might be one of the lyrics. And you
Mm-hmm.
said, first of all, comparing sexual orientation to supporting slavery and lynching is quite the feat, but also acting as if these differences are simply not a big deal, just petty differences to be overcome, like one's taste in music fills me, at least, with incandescent rage.
Yeah.
Rucker is the guy with a top 40 hit decrying Charleston's flying the Confederate flag in the state capitol. Are you fucking kidding me with this shit?
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's mellowed out. Right. Hootie and the Blowfish. I'm blanking on the name of the song, but like they have a song about like why is there a Confederate flag flying over Charleston, right? That was one of their hits in the 90s. And
Mm,
then he's duetting on this fucking song. That's like love is love, which yeah, I mean, as a queer person, it bothers me that that's like the slogan. of like the movement at the moment because it's fucking Lin-Manuel Miranda. Like a queer person didn't even say that. So like let's just move on.
I didn't know that until I read your essay. I didn't know that he kind of faux coined the term or something like
It
that.
was from like a Tony accepted speech or something. And
Mm,
he was responding to some, I think the shooting at Pulse, but
mhm.
still like, come on. Like we don't
Right.
need to put that guy on a pedestal for us
What do
or
you?
allow him to speak for us. And like with Darius, I don't know. Again, I used to be a lot more critical about, you know, artists, especially like country artists who aren't out or whatever. I just think like when you reach that level of stardom that you have so many people depending on you for their livelihood, like you have your team, your PR, your pub, like whatever, the people who are like mailing your record, your t-shirts, right? Like
Yeah.
if you are not successful, then they don't have jobs. And so I think there is a lot of pressure, and it's not just in country music, where once you reach a certain point, you don't want to jeopardize that success and you might make compromises. And so if you don't want to be out because you're worried that's going to impact the people around you, then maybe you don't want to take that risk. Or maybe you just don't want people to know who you're dating, which I think like what's that that New York Times opinion column? We should know less about each other.
I did say that
Like,
before, but that's
yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. Like, do I need to know who's dating who? I don't know. But like again, it goes back to that tension that I think we all have to navigate. Like, what is our responsibility to the communities we come from, and versus is our responsibility to ourselves?
So when you
And yeah,
write about that, like in Rainbow Rodeo, like
mhm,
you're talking about pop stars and pop culture a little bit, but
mhm,
still the focus is like the DIY scene. So like how do you what's like the direct kind of like correlation or like what's the importance of you like connecting that to like what you're trying to accomplish for your magazine?
mhm. I think like for me, it's about making sure people know it exists. Um, I wanted to do a print magazine because we need to cut through the internet. I mean, that's kind of it. The idea also was a sort of like mutual support thing where if artists can buy the zines in bulk and take them on tour as merch, then we're all helping each other out by basically advertising for each other. The idea for the zine is that you can take this and pass it around and nobody can delete it. As long as there's a physical copy somewhere, this history and these artists exist, no matter what happens on the internet. Um, as we've seen, it's really not forever. I think I don't know. I think like I come from a very privileged background myself, so I'm not gonna pretend I'm like punk rock at all. But I think, I guess a question for me as a person, sorry, I'm looking down at the zine. A question for me as a person, but also like with artists is how do we build community in a way that really supports everybody and has true diversity of opinions and approaches. I think like um, the music of some of these more successful artists is really worth considering on an artistic and critical level. And um, there's more out there. So if you like this one person, make sure you are digging a little deeper and see who inspired them. It's like this music matters to people. It's not my identity, but for people who have grown up around it, it is. And for someone to put on a cowboy hat and a mask and suddenly get a bunch of like arena tours, like um, you're tapping into people who felt shut out of that identity.
Mm,
And how do we make sure it's not just a costume? And at the same time, like line dancing parties for some reason have become very, very popular in like queer communities. And like everyone likes to dress up as a cowboy and like do that, and that's cool. Um, but also like again, it's not my culture's not a costume, except it kind of is. And I think that's sort of the tension of country music.
mm.
Um, but people deserve to feel at home in the cultures they grew up in, and people deserve, or if you are like me and just really enjoy country music and something about it speaks to you, you deserve to feel at home there. And so that's what Rainbow Rodeo is for, is like making sure everyone has that home.
Right.
I don't know if I answered that question. I guess the question is, I don't know the answer, and maybe that's the point of this whole project. It's like, is there a way to do both? Honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. It was cool to see that criticism and that thought process, and then also your contemporary knowledge of Lin Manuel, like coining that term, and then thinking about like what that means when it goes out in the world, and then thinking about like what I don't know. I keep thinking of that country singer who said he's coming for Beyonce.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's also just like I've been asking people about it more directly, but I haven't really been talking to straight country artists because I've been like busy with all the stuff I mentioned at the beginning of
Yeah,
the podcast. But I think there is a sense that like the shittiest people in the industry are like feeling very emboldened. Um, you know, yeah, I think we'll see who is willing to stick their neck out and take a risk, not in the mainstream part of the country world, not just on like, marginalized artists,
yeah,
right? Women, people of color, queer people, but also like the kind of music that they're going to play on the radio. Um, so Oliver Anthony was kind of like part of this wave of guys who are copying Tyler Childers and Jason Isbell. I think I'd be remiss not to talk about Morgan Wallen, who also is famously publicly racist and drunk and just like a bad
yeah,
guy all around, but the industry keeps um, uplifting him because he basically is a money making machine. But I think
yeah.
he's also an example of like a guy nobody wants to say no to because they all depend on him. But like that dude needs rehab. Like, you know, and he knows it, but if he stops, then what happens to everyone while they're waiting for him to recover? Anyway, that's a tangent. But
That's okay. Yeah,
yeah, like there are artists out there who are like doing this kind of bare bones acoustic raspy voice kind of thing. Tyra Childers has been doing it for a long time. John Moreland, Abigail Austin, who used to tour as Austin Lucas, my favorite band, Two Cow Garage. This was like in the 2010s. They were like doing this really cool Appalachian, Midwestern emo punk
mm,
rock, heartland rock thing. Um, Zach Bryan, who's now super famous, he definitely was inspired by them. And he's been so successful that now Nashville is like got a conveyor belt of guys who want to sound like that. But what they don't have is like the class analysis or the politics that came with those other artists.
uh,
So Tyler Childers is not going to be Nashville famous because he's an outspoken liberal, right? Um, and now that they've got these guys who either don't want to talk about politics or have the politics that you and I would prefer no one had, um, they've got those guys to make that sound, and that's what you're also going to hear on the radio as well. Um, and so I think there is a sense of like we're taking country music back. There was like this 5-year period or so during the Trump administration where like people in the industry tried to foreground other types of people. And I think we're going to see a combination of people who are pushing back against it. So like the worst people being like, finally, Morgan Wallen can say the N-word and not get in trouble. But also, I think people who are scared to make a decision and scared to make a stand.
literally when he said, "I'm going back to God country," I'm going back to God's country. I was like,
Yeah,
so I can say the N word is what how I finished the sentence. Like,
exactly. Also, like Nashville, dude, like they don't even know how to cook there. Like, sorry, I'm just like that's my New York snobbery, but like that's God's country. Like, it's a bunch of people in cowboy boots, but
it's
also a lot
interesting.
of really great musicians too. But I think like the city itself is really interesting. Um, it feels like New York in like the 2010s, where like you've got the rapid gentrification, the artists who are just there because they could afford to live there and have a great community,
Hmm.
the people trying to commodify all of it all at the same time. Like you can go to Nashville as a tourist and not have any idea that there's a thriving Black community, not have any idea of like,
Really,
the HBCUs. Because if all you want to do is go like to Broadway to the honky tonks and get drunk, like all you're gonna see is like country music and like white people enjoying country music. And like, that's not the city. Um, if you are there to do the more historical things, I haven't gone to those in a long time, but it was interesting. Belle Mead, one of the like plantation museums, when I was there in 2012, they were working on a project of oral histories in North
Mhm.
Nashville, is where a lot of Black families live, to try to like recover any history they can about, you know, Black life on those plantations and afterwards. Then if you go in the other direction to Andrew Jackson's plantation, they're like, huh, the Trail of Tears? I guess that happened. It's like kind of wild. But yeah, I mean it's an interesting city in that you can see the way this history is being negotiated and retold in real time. And I also think like country music, beyond like whatever you feel about the music itself, I think it is interesting to follow these cultural conversations about it, because it's like, it's such a microcosm for how we're talking about America. But of course, with Trump, there's no subtext. So I guess we don't really need country music to do that for us.
No, and I was working with a country artist last month, and I was looking at all these country websites, and I was like, man, oh, it's like everything goes through Nashville, and
Hmm.
you run into Jesus more often than not,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
kind of why how can Jesus be so synonymous with country?
Hmm. Yeah. Makes you think, right? And that wasn't always the case necessarily. Also, Nashville is like the epicenter for like contemporary Christian music, which like
Oh,
it's so funny how like if like I'm not plugged into it, but like if you don't know, it's also very hidden. But I'm starting to see more and more like people who started off in CCM is what it's called, like transfer over into like mainstream country music. Um, and of course there's this whole ecosystem for them, right? With Fox and Friends and, you know, talk radio and whatever the fuck. So like, if you want to be conservative and outspokenly conservative, it is very easy to become famous. And Nashville itself has been marketing itself as a sort of like conservative Hollywood. And that's also creating a lot of tensions with living there and making music there too.
hmm. How would you describe yourself as a writer?
Mm, I don't think I spend too much time thinking about it, but I should. Like, I do feel like um, this is my creative output. And especially with Adobe and Teardrops, a lot of those album reviews are like basically cryptic diary entries. I've gone back and read a few, and I was like, oh, who was I sad about this when I wrote this one? Um, but yeah, I think for me, I want to try to zero in on like what the artist's ideas are and try to help explain that. Um, I think I've been successful at it because, you know, people thank me, they tell me that my reviews made them cry, or um, I've been interviewing people for a long time before I started studying social work. And so I think like those skills definitely reinforce each other. So people seem to be excited for when I asked to interview them. Because I don't really like see my own ego in it. I mean, I think like I write these columns and I know they can be a little spicy sometimes, but I don't want to put that in any writing that is related to like somebody's actual music, because they've worked really, really hard to get it out there. And so my job is to step out of the way and explain why I think it's important.
Love that. Why? I've noticed a lot of Substacks. This is kind of like industry-ish question, but also when I was doing a lot of research last month, I was like, I didn't realize how many Substacks there were out there. Like everyone's making a Substack. Like,
It's like the equivalent of like starting like a guy in Brooklyn starting a podcast, but now you could just do Substack because there's like even less overhead.
what made you choose like a common type of website than a Substack for
Mhm.
Rainbow Rodeo?
Well, I actually did do a newsletter for a couple years, way before Substack was popular. So I was a little too ahead of the curve.
I
I
see
think
you.
the
I see you.
issue, yeah, is the issue I have with newsletters is that like I guess if I were to Google a phrase from that newsletter or something, it would be it's indexed, right? You can find it online, but it doesn't look attractive. I mean, things have gone a long way with Substack, and Beehive is like the other really popular one. Um, but it just doesn't really feel that permanent, right? Like it's going to someone's inbox and then they delete it and then it's just kind of gone.
Mm.
Also, like, I guess I'm a little stuck in my ways if I'm not gonna try to like navigate TikTok or whatever, but I've been doing a blog, so I'm gonna keep doing a blog. Um, but also like with Substack, the reason it's exploded is because they paid a bunch of people to join the platform.
Oh,
So like, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like if you look at other social media networks like Blue Sky or Twitter, like, they invited people who they thought were important to start using the product, and then that's how you get people to use it. I mean, that's just how the world works. But yeah, it's interesting because I can see like industry by industry, they're going through and offering like that grant. Uh, they first got popular a couple of years ago because they said like, hey, we're offering like whatever it was, a couple $1,000s, like thousands of dollars a year to people to grow your subscriber base. And if you get to a certain number by the end of the year, um, we'll work out like a deal with you.
that's
So,
nice.
which again, like nothing wrong with that. They make their money by taking a cut of subscriber fees. So how do you get people to subscribe, pay for a Substack? You get
Yeah,
people who they want to pay for. Um, but also like their stance on free speech is pretty icky. Like
really.
a lot of their money is coming from like Barry Weiss and other like conservative and far right writers. And they've doubled down on it multiple times. It's not hate speech. We believe in freedom of speech. That means everybody gets to use our platform. So I was like, all right, fuck that. I don't want to use that anyway.
Hmm.
But the platform I'm using called Ghost, it allows you to do kind of all of it at the same time. So it's a website, but I can also just send out an essay as an email to my subscribers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So it's like, well, why am I paying for a website and copying and pasting everything into a newsletter and paying for podcast hosting when I can just, and Patreon takes a cut of the subscription fees if I can just kind of consolidate that into one thing that just makes my life easier. So uh, I stopped doing the newsletter for a little bit, I think, and was focusing on the website. And then when it became much easier to do all of it at the same time, I just like do that. So there is a weekly newsletter. It's pretty much an excerpt of whatever the column from the week was, as well as just links to anything you might have missed. So as well as event listings. So lots of concerts out there all over the country, all over the world. So I think it's important to like send out that information so that people know who's out there to go see. Indie artists really depend on t-shirt sales more than anything else to make money. So it's really important to go to shows
Mhm.
and if you can buy something when you get there.
I 1000% agree with you there. Not that I haven't agreed with everything else.
Oh, thanks.
Uh, and another industry question I really want to
Hmm.
ask you, something because I've just been kind of like exposed to a lot of it in the last 6 months. I've noticed that like writers have a very you'll see they'll be writing for a publication for a
Hmm.
certain amount of time and then it's just like gone. Like it
Hmm.
seems rare that writers stay with a publication for more than 5 or 10 years. It's like very transient. I don't know if that's the right
Hmm.
word, but I don't know if there's like a lot of burnout. Like people are like they move to their own pastures, so to speak, or they or it's I don't know if it's burnout. I don't know. It's really interesting.
Hmm. Well, I think it's a lot of different things. So, um, first of all, I think it's rare for any publication to have the same owner for more than 5 years and
Hmm.
an owner who's willing to tolerate that the profit margin is not growing year over year, right? Everyone's got like this McKinsey brain that like only the successful business only grows as opposed to just like has a comfortable profit.
Hmm.
So, the reason why I've written for so many places over the years is because we keep getting laid off. So
Uh,
like Wide Open Country, the editor
I
worried
saw
me
your letter.
big. Yeah, assembled like a Justice League of journalists who were writing about diversity in country music and wanted to advocate for more of it. Um, and then the owner was becoming displeased with that. So, you know, she got shit canned, which means that the rest of us are there at the pleasure of whoever the new editor is. Or really what happens is like, we're not making enough money selling banner ads, so we're going to have to let some writers go.
Right.
And that's kind of just the path. So the places that have been stable for me are basically people with rich benefactors who don't really care about how much money the thing is making. So like the Nashville scene is like Nashville's Alt Weekly, and the guy who owns it just seems very happy to be the pillar of the community who runs a newspaper. Like honestly, like that's how rich people should be. Like I get off on the fact that I own this thing and I'm just gonna let it run, right? Because if you're that rich, you don't have to care if it's making money. Um, No Depression is now owned, which is like the premier Americana music publication that's owned by a foundation. So it's a nonprofit. Um, so again, it's not trying to like have like 2% growth every year or whatever. Um, but yeah, so I think it's a combination of there's just not that many places that are stable as you've seen. There's not that many places paying people to write. And also like it's you can't really make a living off of it unless you're like really hustling or you're able to break into that tier of like Rolling Stone or whatever. Like for me, it's never been my goal to be only a music writer. It started out as a hobby. The W and Teardrops was just a blog that I did to advocate for these artists. And then the artists got picked up and got like industry support. And then I was able to get paid to write about it because I was already pretty knowledgeable about them. Um,
Beautiful.
yeah, right. So, but I think that's just like a nice coincidence of timing and politics and just existing in this moment and trying to write about it through the lens of music. That's how it becomes relevant. Uh, but yeah, I can't imagine it's really hard to make a living. You don't get paid that much. And so if you are trying to make this your full-time job, it gets really exhausting. And also, I have not had this experience, but I've heard from other people that there are a lot of publications who you wouldn't think would be very delayed with their payments or like irregular with them. Um, and so I think and I'm talking about like magazines, anyone listening, or websites that anyone listening to this would have heard of. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean they haven't paid you yet? Right. So like, um, I've been lucky that like these sort of smaller and mid-sized publications I've worked with, like at least invest in HR and accounting. So I've never really had to bother anybody. Um, but like, it's really precarious and you definitely have to have some other day job to make it work until you can break in. And there's a lot of overlap, at least within country and Americana, of people who switch back and forth between being journalists and working as publicists, because at least you've got steady work if you're a publicist. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I may have done some of that. I
Yeah.
was like, wait a second. Um, it's weird because I love music so much and I want to write about these artists. But I'm like, how can I make this work
Hmm.
while I want to support these artists? Like, yeah, it's hard. They deserve all that support. Yeah, it's really interesting kind of like field um, to witness.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know like what my advice would be for like some kid who's graduating from college, other than like don't lose sight of your love of the game, because um I think it's cyclical. I don't think anyone's going to be like making $10,000 an article anymore unless they're
Mhm.
writing for like something owned by Hearst. But like, um, I think there's an appreciation for physical objects like magazines. I think like we see that with the Rainbow Rodeo zine. I think there's a lot of interest in AI right now, but I think people who care about the product they sell are going to want to hire people who are good at it. I think
Yeah,
that's just always been true, no matter what any technological change there has been, right? Like people are still publishing books, people are still making plays. You know, it's not going to be easy, but I think like find a way to keep like refilling your passion for it and also find a way to put food on the table, even if those aren't always the same things. But I also know it's very easy for me to say that because like I've never wanted to have this be my full-time gig, and I will be very happy when I no longer have to feel like I need to write as a freelancer and that it can just be like an unpaid hobby again.
where can and how can people access Rainbow Rodeo?
Yeah, so you can go to rainbowrodeomag.com. And from there, you can sign up for the newsletter if that's your thing. Again, it's once a week. For the free one, just sort of a summary of everything we've published for that week. So I don't think it's too annoying. If you become a paid subscriber, you get to choose some goodies, you get this access to the zine, you can get some art, get some like mixed CDs that I still need to put in the mail. We also have a podcast, so there's like director's cut versions of the podcasts. Just a couple extra bonus questions for the artists. And yeah, I don't know. Though I want to make something that people really enjoy and feel like they get something out of, but I also want to make something that feels useful to artists as well.
Cool.
And I'm on like every social media platform, including Mastodon. So just search Rainbow Rodeo and everything but TikTok, I guess. Yeah.
Avoiding TikTok.
Yeah. No one. I don't do videos. I don't listen to that. Watch them. I'm not gonna talk into one.
Thanks for doing the interview. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I know that this is like a really hard landscape to navigate.